To bring in one of the senators who will vote on this impeachment trial, Democrat Chris Murphy of Connecticut, who is in there as a juror today. You are the formal audience of this. There are obviously multiple audiences of this, but you are the formal constitutional audience for the presentation today. In that role, what was your reaction to what you saw today?
Well, I feel like I need to go get a beer with Rachel because that was a lot to experience and essentially relive. I mean, we were, for the first time in that chamber, watching security footage of ourselves fleeing the United States Senate chamber to safety. Obviously, we've thought about that many times. We've thought about how close we came to harm, but this was the first time that any of us had actually seen that live footage. I guess, Chris, maybe what has struck me most about the presentations in the first 2 days is just how much impeachable conduct there is. There are really these three baskets of impeachable conduct. You've got the ongoing assault on democracy, all of his overtures to state election officials to try to overturn the election. Then you have his incitement of the mob, his knowing push for them to move to the Capitol, given the probability for violence. And then you have this lack of response. You have his decision to essentially stand down and let the attack continue. I think what was so interesting today was to see this real-time footage from the building in which you saw this connection between those rioters and the president. They knew exactly what he was tweeting that day. They heard him loud and clear when he was attacking Vice President Pence, and it gives you this sense that had he reacted more strongly once the attack began, and had he been clearer about their need to leave, that they would have listened to that too. And I think that really came through today. Yeah, there were just multiple moments. I mean, someone literally reading a presidential tweet through a bullhorn. Someone upon first entrance, this was very striking to me, upon first entrance, this is the kind of vanguard that makes it in first. And these are people that look like they came ready for this kind of activity. One of them saying, where are they counting the effing votes? Which is just like, that is what the intent was. Like, that was what the president wanted them to focus on. And that is what one of the first people through focused on, as you saw today. Well, and what has always struck me is that there was no events planned at the United States Capitol for these people to march to and attend, right? The president wasn't sending them to the Capitol to listen to a group of speeches. There were no instructions other than go to the Capitol, stop the steal. And the only way that you can practically stop the certification once it's ongoing is to enter the building. So this is why I think it's so important to understand how there's no way to read the president's behavior that day other than to knowingly be pushing people into violence. And I thought the managers did a great job, and I'm not exactly sure what the president's lawyers are going to say in response. You know, I want to circle back to one more thing you said when you talk about these buckets of impeachable conduct, because today we do have news of a formal criminal inquiry being opened in Fulton County in Georgia of the president's conduct with this call with his actions there to attempt to overturn the election. Not just one call to Brad Raffensperger, multiple calls, possible interference with the U.S. attorney, calls to the governor, et cetera. You know, that as I was watching this today and thinking about the prelude, I mean, that one call to Brad Raffensperger, the one call, if you were a Chicago alderman, and I covered Chicago politics, calling the Cook County election official, he would be indicted within the week by a U.S. attorney. Just unquestionably, that would be the case. So, and that's not even appearing. We're not even on that issue today, despite the fact that these are all actions taken in a chain that leads up to January 6th. Yeah, and it is all part of this same story, right? It's a president who has built up this expectation that the vote is fraudulent and that his supporters need to do something about it. He exhausts all of his nonviolent options so that the only option left is violence. But yes, I don't think it should be lost on all of us that had that rally never taken place, had people not died that day, the president still engaged in conduct that has to be considered impeachable, because if a future president engages in that kind of action, he might be successful in actually overturning an election. And so you have to label it all totally impermissible. You have to label it all high crimes and misdemeanors. Final question for you is about the story and the centrality of Mike Pence, because I think it was very effective, both persuasively and also narratively, which is to say, Pence is the key figure here. And he's only the key figure, honestly, because the president elevates him to such. There is no one else prior
thinking, well, it's just going to come down to the vice president. It's not like we go and do this and we say, well, the vice president wants to accept the votes, then it goes this way. And if he doesn't, it goes the other way. Like, no one thinks that. But for him, and Pence really played a central role in today's story. And I wonder how that landed in the room.
Well, I think it landed very well, in part because it's truth. He was the central figure. He was likely the person who was most in danger physically that day. He was mentioned 11 times by the president. But it also does highlight the fact that there's nothing partisan or political about this impeachment. In fact, the president was targeting Republicans in those speeches as much as he was Democrats. While Nancy Pelosi was certainly at risk that day, it may be that those rioters would have done more physical damage to Republicans, rhinos, as Donald Trump calls them, as they would have done to Democrats. And so I think as the president's lawyers will try to make the case that this is just a political partisan impeachment, the vote in the House speaks against that, but also the conduct of the rioters shown in these videos makes it pretty clear that they were going to hurt people no matter whether they had a D or an R next to their name.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel. You should know that you can follow today's top stories and breaking news and catch up on your favorite MSNBC shows all in one place. Download the NBC News app today.